So this will be part 4 of the module that we have been doing from the beginning. And now this slide was there in our earlier class also, which showed what are we going to do in applications of Schrodinger equation. And this today's class will basically be the final class for applications of Schrodinger equation, because the topics that we are going to cover in today's class is up to where you have in your syllabus in this semester. The other applications of Schrödinger's equation are probably in the next or following semesters. So we already did free states, and we said that they were also bound states. And in free states, we did the 3 problems: the free particle, which was, was a trivial problem. Then we had the step potential, where the particle was coming in from one side, but it faced a potential step as a barrier, which made it reflect back. But we saw that even if the particle was coming with an energy lesser than the value of the step, quantum mechanical treatment allowed it to penetrate a little bit into the forbidden region. This is the first time that we were facing penetration into a classical forbidden region. And then we discussed the potential barrier, where we saw that there was a barrier, there was only a certain region in space where a potential existed. But even if the particle was coming, so it was like a wall that the approaching particle was facing. But we saw that even if the particle was coming with energy that is lesser than the height of that wall, so classically it would be impossible for it to do anything else other than getting deflected back. But quantum mechanical treatment showed that this particle could tunnel through the barrier and keep moving on in the positive x direction on the other side, that is region 3, if you can recall what I'm trying to say from our previous classes. So this tunneling was again a novel phenomena that could be observed only because of quantum mechanical treatment, not possible classically. And then finally we discussed alpha decay, the radioactive decay of heavy nuclei by emission of alpha particles, and we saw how quantum mechanical treatment involving barrier penetration or tunneling could be used to justify or to explain alpha decay from heavy nuclei. All right, and I also gave you the other example, that is of tunnel diodes, which we did not discuss in detail, but the example of tunnel diodes is this, using the same principle of tunneling effect through a potential barrier. So that was the free states. Now in the bound states, we, as this slide says, that we have to discuss one-dimensional infinitely rigid potential box and a three-dimensional potential box. Now the three-dimensional potential box is not there in your syllabus mentioned specifically, but I feel that if you are doing the one-dimensional potential box, then a generalization into 3 dimension should be done now instead of later on. So even though it is not specifically mentioned in your syllabus, it mentions only one-dimensional infinitely rigid potential box, I have included the working out of the 3-dimensional problem in the notes that I have sent you, and in today's PowerPoint also. I'll not be very detailed in the discussion of the 3D box, but I will just mention what happens in a 3D box. Okay, but before that, let us see what is meant by bound states. Okay, how is it different from the free states that we studied? All right, so obviously the word, English word bound states, indicates that the particle is no longer free. It is bound to something. What does that mean? It means that the problems that we have been discussing so far, the present problem is different from those, in that here the particle is not approaching from a potential free region to face a wall or a barrier of a finite height, as we discussed in the cases of step potential or barrier potential. Okay, so now the problem will be such that the particle is confined to a region from which it cannot come out. Okay, so that is why it is called a bound state. It is confined to a region and it cannot come out from that region. Yes? Is someone telling me something? Okay. Now the
No, ma'am.
box or well, as we will when we go to the specific problem, you'll see what this looks like. So the box or the well in which the particle is confined has impenetrable walls and infinite potential at the boundaries. So it's almost like a particle has fallen into a well, you know, কুয়োর মধ্যে কিছু একটা পড়ে গেছে আর সেটা কোনোভাবেই বাইরে আসা সেটার পক্ষে সম্ভব না, কোনোভাবেই সম্ভব না, because the walls are infinitely height and they are impenetrable. So it is not, so the particle has to remain confined, it is trapped within that well. So when we were discussing free particle states, as I just told you in the first slide, we encountered quantum phenomena like penetration and tunneling into the classically forbidden region. Now let us see what the bound states have in store. Okay, so let us go directly to the problem, first problem of a bound state. Now the first problem is that of a one-dimensional infinitely rigid potential box. Now first of all, let us decipher what this is. What is an one-dimensional infinitely rigid potential box, or it is sometimes also called potential well? Okay, this is what we mean by the above heading. Okay, so you see the particle is in such a situation where the potential is infinite on either side of this space over here, but the potential is zero inside the space. All right, so let us see, the particle will be inside here in this v equal to 0 region, and it moves initially, it moves non-relativistically in the positive x direction. Since we are considering movement in only one direction, that is the positive x direction, therefore we call this the one-dimensional box. Obviously, this is a simplification. A one-dimensional box cannot exist, neither can a one-dimensional potential barrier exist. However, this simplification gives us results which we will use in the general study of the 3D box, which of course can be related to real objects, real life objects. All right. So particle is here moving in the positive x direction within this region. Okay, and the walls of this box are situated at x equal to 0 and at x equal to capital L. So the length of the box is capital L. Okay, geometrical length of the box is L. And the potential looks like this. For 0 less than x less than L, that is within this region, the potential is 0. And anywhere outside this region, that is for x less than 0 and x greater than L, the potential is infinite. Okay, you can understand that this is a very, very idealized situation, but nevertheless it is worth the study because the outcome can be used, as I told you, in more generalized real life situations. Okay, so what will happen to such a particle if the particle, if you forget about quantum mechanics, just think that a particle is there inside this region v equal to 0, and it has some initial motion which makes it move in the positive x direction. particle will collide with the walls. We assume that this collision is elastic so that there is no change in its energy. Now, question is, does the particle leave the box? Is it possible for the particle at any point of time, under any circumstances, to leave the box? Answer is only if it can perform infinite amount of work. The particle is facing infinite potential at the impenetrable walls with which it is colliding. So it can overcome these boundaries and come outside this trap only if it can perform infinite amount of work. Now that is not allowed thermodynamically. Thermodynamics does not allow performance of infinite amount of work. Okay, so the particle cannot exist outside the boundary of the box. In this problem, it is not under any circumstances possible for the particle to exist anywhere at x less than 0 or x greater than L. This is something we have to keep in mind, okay? So what does it do? It just keeps bouncing back and forth between the walls. It cannot come outside. It does not exist outside. Now, classically, of course, this is possible. You can have such a classical problem that the particle is simply bouncing back and forth, cannot come out. And you can calculate that the particle will have a momentum of constant magnitude, but change in direction every time it is colliding with the wall. Every time it collides with the wall, it reflects back. So the momentum keeps changing, but the momentum has a constant value, that is 2 mu. You have all done this kind of a problem. Okay. And classical mechanics also predicts that it can have continuous energy of any possible value. There is no restriction to the value of the energy that the particle can have while performing this to and fro motion within the box. However, quantum mechanics does not say so. You might, feel that what is the speciality of this problem? In our earlier problems, we saw that the particle was coming from a free, force-free region. It was facing a wall or a barrier or a step, and there was penetration or there was tunneling, moving into the other side. All classically forbidden phenomena was happening quantum mechanically, and it was possible for the particle to tunnel through, bore through the impenetrable wall and come out into the forbidden region, which made the tunnel diode or alpha decay happen. So what is special about this problem? I mean, the particle is trapped inside, it cannot come out. So that is okay. I mean, classically, if we do such a problem, then also we get the same result. So what does quantum mechanics give us? And you will see when we do the mathematics of this problem, that it is like, it would look like, class 5 level work compared to class 12 level work. If you compare the mathematics of this problem with the mathematics that we have been doing in the earlier problems. You have, of course, gone through the notes, I'm sure, and realized that how very, very complex mathematics we had to endure in order to get the results of the step potential or the barrier potential. Okay, and we'll see that the mathematics involved in this problem is nothing compared to that. So, but of course, this gives us some extremely interesting and important results, so that we are studying this as a separate unit. So let us see what that result is. Okay. So first of all, since we realize that the particle cannot exist outside the box, so before starting anything else, we write down that the wave function psi x is 0 for mod x greater than L, that is for x less than 0 or x greater than L. There is no existence of the wave function outside the well or the box. Now inside the box, that is for mod x less than L, we are now very familiar with the time independent Schrodinger equation, and inside the box V is 0, so it's a force-free region, and this is the form of the Schrodinger equation. And very easy to solve this, no potential, so a very simple second order differential equation where this kappa, the constant, is simply root over 2me by h cut square, and the solution of this is a sinusoidal solution. As we all know, only in this case we do not write the e to the power I form, we write the a sin kx plus b cos kx form for our mathematical convenience. All right. So the solution of this differential equation is a sin kx plus a sin kappa x plus b cos kappa x, where a and b are constants. And of course, we will use the boundary conditions to find out these constants. Okay. So what are the boundary conditions? First of all, psi is 0 outside. So psi must also be 0 at the boundaries, because after all, if it is to be a solution of Schrodinger equation, it has to be a well-behaved function, and for being a well-behaved function, it has to be continuous. So psi equal to 0 at x equal to 0 and psi equal to 0 at x equal to L. So the first condition, if you put in this equation, in this expression over here, you get a into 0 plus b into 1 is 0, which of course means that b is 0. So this constant capital B is 0. So the wave function is of the form a sin kx. So we are left with only one arbitrary constant, and let us see whether we can find this arbitrary constant. The second, therefore, using this psi equal to a sin kappa x, we put the second boundary condition. This will be L, not A. So a sin kl is equal to 0. So this expression will be 0 only if capital A equal to 0 or sin kappa L equal to 0. Now capital A cannot be equal to 0, because then the wave function will be non-existent. We already found, due to the boundary condition, capital B is 0. If capital A also becomes 0, it would mean that the wave function does not exist at all. So there is no particle anywhere, whether inside or outside the box, there is no particle, so no wave function. So that is a trivial solution, and we do not consider that. So we are left with sin kappa L equal to 0. Please note that this expression over here, this will not be small a, this will be capital L. Okay, please note that. If need be, I don't remember if this change was done in the note to the PDF. There also please make the necessary change. Okay, so we are left with sin kappa L equal to 0, which means, of course, only possible if kappa L equal to n pi or kappa equal to n pi by L. Note again that n should be equal to 1, 2, 3, etc. But n cannot be 0, because that would also lead to a null result. Now sin kappa L equal to 0 can mean kappa L equal to n pi and n equal to 0 also. But for this particular solution, we cannot consider the n equal to 0 value, because that again would lead to a zero wave function, a non-existent wave function, which is a trivial solution. So n can only start from 1 and take any integral value further. All right. So this expression here, the expression for kappa equal to n pi by L, is the key to the discussions that are going to follow and the results that we are going to get from this particular problem. Okay, as you know, the mathematics is very trivial, that we endure in the earlier problems. So the final form of the equation psi equal to a sin kappa x, we replace kappa by n pi by L, and we get the value of psi n x equal to a sin n pi x by L. So these are the eigenfunctions of the particle. I have put a suffix n with psi because as you can see that n can take different values and the expression of psi would depend on the value of n. So I put a suffix n in the eigenfunction psi. So now the eigenfunctions of the particle read psi nx equal to a sine n pi x by L. Now from the expression or the substitution that we made with kappa, we had kappa equal to root over 2me by h cut square. So that n pi by capital L is equal to root 2me by h cut square. So solving, we get E equal to n square pi square h cut square by 2m L square. Note that here again with E I have put a suffix n because again n is a changing number and the value of the energy would depend on the value of n, and therefore these are the energy eigenvalues of the particle. So we've got the energy functions, we've got the eigenfunctions of the particle and we've got the energy eigenvalues of the particle, and therefore we are at a position to write down the eigenvalue equation which is given by Hamiltonian operating on psi n equal to energy into psi n. Note that the suffix n is always there. So this is the eigenvalue equation followed by the wave function, and what we read from this is that the number n is the quantum number corresponding to the eigenvalue En for an eigenfunction psi nx. Okay, so H is the eigenvalue operator, psi n is the eigenfunction, En is the eigenvalue for this equation, for this eigenvalue equation, and n is called the quantum number. Why n is called the quantum number will be clear very soon. So now we have to discuss the results that we got. You saw that the mathematics for finding the solution and then finding the energy eigenvalues are all pretty trivial, pretty easy compared to what we've done. But now we have to discuss the physics embedded in these results, and that is what is more important. Okay. First thing you see that the minimum possible value of the energy eigenvalue En is for n equal to 1 because that is the lowest value of n. N equal to 0 is not possible because that would give us a null wave function. So that is a trivial solution. We do not consider that. So the lowest possible value of n is 1, and that would give me the lowest possible value of the energy. So this lowest, the minimum value of energy is given by E1. We write 1 in place of n, and that is given by pi square h cut square by 2m L square. So this is called the ground state energy of the particle. The lowest possible energy that the particle can have is called the ground state energy of the particle. And then putting n equal to 2, 3, etc., we can find the higher energy states. So for n equal to 2, you can see that E2 is 2 square pi square h cut square by 2m L square. So this is simply 2 squared into E1. E1 is pi square h cut square 2m L square. So E2, the value of energy for n equal to 2 is 2 squared E1. E3 is 3 squared E1, and so on till we go to the highest possible value of n, that is n equal to n, and get En, that is energy for the nth state, is given by n square E1. So you can see that all the higher energy states have eigenenergies which are related to the ground state energy. Okay, they are not unrelated. All the higher energy states have energies which
Ma'am,
is, yes.
ma'am, this looks quite like the electron kind, like that when you find the energies of electrons in bounded shells. So it's, does it actually have a relevance here, like this whole physics, like?
Absolutely, this is from where it all came. This is from where it all came. Absolutely, this
Yes,
is
thank you.
totally relevant. Yes, okay. So these are what are called the higher excited states. Okay. So now things are looking familiar, right? You have read all this in your atomic physics or atomic chemistry or whatever when you have studied atoms, and now things are looking familiar. So so we have to understand why this problem, which mathematically is pretty easy compared to the free state problems, is so important. So first of all, we get energy which is related to a particular number n, okay, and that number is deciding the nature of the eigenvalue equation. The eigenvalue equation depends on the value of n. The eigenenergies depend on the value of n. The eigenfunctions depend on the value of n. Okay. Next, we see that the lowest possible value of the energy is obtained when n equal to 1, and that is called the ground state energy. And all the higher values of energy obtained by putting n equal to 2, 3, 4, etc. up to n is are all sort of related to the ground state energy in this manner, and we call these the higher excited states. Okay, we have to note that n, because of the solution that is given, because of the way we solve the differential equation, n can have only integral values, and therefore the only possible values of energy are these. Okay, so these are the only values of energy that the particle may possess, corresponding to the values of n equal to 1, 2, 3, etc. So I'm sure you are getting where I am heading. Classically, this problem has been done several times, but classical physics predicts that the momentum is constant, changes direction, and the energy can change, but it can be continuous and have any possible values. Quantum mechanics comes in and defies that very result. It says that energy cannot have any possible values. The energy possessed by the particle can only have values corresponding to the integral values of n, and these E1, E2, E3, E4, etc. up to En are the only possible values of energy that the particle may possess. All right. So
Ma'am,
energy
I have
cannot,
another question.
yes.
Ma'am, how microscopic the system must be for this to work? Like, does it work for a gas locked in a chamber, or
No,
just like?
it doesn't. It doesn't. The mass of a gas particle is too high for this to work. As you can see that this is the expression of energy. All right. So H is a very small number. It is on top. M is below. So in order for these energies to be significant, M must be very small. This is possible only for submicroscopic atomic and subatomic particles. It is only
Okay,
possible in the microscopic world. Okay.
okay, ma'am.
All right. As you all know, quantum mechanics and relativity are applicable only to very small and very fast moving particles. Of course, here we are considering non-relativistic motion, so we are doing non-relativistic quantum mechanics, and relativistic quantum mechanics forms a completely different genre, a completely different field of study where relativity is also considered. But for the time being, you have to understand that we are dealing with only microscopic particles. This is not possible for macroscopic world. So energy cannot have any possible value. It cannot have continuous values. These are the two most important things that are coming out from the result of solving Schrodinger equation. Energy cannot have any possible values. Energy cannot have continuous values. So there are discrete energy levels, the values of which are decided by the values of the quantum number n. So, for the first time, we are encountering quantization of energy. So, the particle trapped in an infinitely rigid box is important because it, for the first time, brings to us the phenomenon of quantization of energy. When a particle is trapped in such an infinite box, it cannot have any possible value of energy. Its energy is quantized. Okay, so this is the most important result that comes out from this problem. Next, you see that the gap between, since there are only certain values of energy that are allowed by the possible values of the quantum number n, so we have different levels of energy, discrete energy levels, and therefore obviously there are gaps between these energy levels. Now you can very easily compute the gap between two such energy levels, En and En plus 1, the nth energy level and its consecutive higher energy level. And it is given by this because each energy level is n squared of E1, the ground state energy level. And you can see that the gap between any two consecutive energy levels is 2n plus 1 into E1, the ground state energy level. So obviously, as n increases, as you go further up for higher values of n, the energy levels are more widely spaced. So the further high we go with higher and higher values of n, the gap between consecutive energy levels increase. Higher energy levels are therefore widely spaced. I'm sure all of you can relate to the atomic model that you all have studied. So this is the pictorial depiction of the energy levels. They are discrete, and the higher up you go, the wider is the gap between any two energy level. Okay, and this is our coveted energy level diagram. Energy levels, discrete energy levels. This is the ground state and second higher state, third higher state, fourth higher. So these are the excited states, and one gives you the ground state. Okay, so very important that you face quantization for the first time. This quantum mechanical treatment does not allow continuous values or any possible values of energy. Only the values given by the integer n are the allowed values of energy, and therefore for the first time we get discrete energy levels. All right, next we have to normalize the wave function. Now we did a general study of normalization, but we saw that when we are doing free states, it is not possible to normalize the wave function in the sense that you can normalize it, of course, otherwise we wouldn't get the current densities and all, probability current densities and all, but the wave function remained arbitrary up to one multiplicative constant. Okay, so we, using the boundary conditions, we found the constant, all the constants in terms of any one constant. and wrote the wave functions in the different regions in terms of any one particular constant. But that one particular constant always remained arbitrary. Let us see what happens here. Okay, so we know that the wave function looks like this. Within the well, it is a sine n pi x by L, and outside the well, it is 0. So the particle has to be found somewhere within the box at some point of time, because it is always there within the box and it will never be found anywhere outside the box. So this much we are sure of. So we can now write the probability density or the normalization condition as 0 to capital L mod psi n square dx equal to 1, because it has to be there somewhere between 0 and L at any one particular point of time. So if you put the expression, so you get that the total probability of finding the particle somewhere within the box is unity, and that exactly gives us a normalization condition for this problem. So putting the value of psi n x, that is a sine n pi x by L, between 0 and L and equating that to 1, what you get is this. Okay, very easy integration, and that means that the constant capital A has been found. So we are no longer left with an arbitrary multiplicative constant in the expression of the wave function. The constant capital A is equal to root over 2 by capital L. So it is a term which depends on the length of the well that the particle is inside. And so we can write the final form of the eigenfunction as psi n x equal to root over 2 by L sine n pi x by L. Okay, so this is my normalized wave function. All right, so this is a very again easy mathematics, but it comes often in your exam, and in the exam what they sometimes do is they change the boundary. Okay, we have done this for 0 to L. It may come for minus L to plus L. It may come for say minus L by 2 to plus L by 2, and accordingly you have to change the boundaries of the limits of the integral and find the final normalized wave function. All right, now let us see what now that we have the normalized wave function at our hand, let us see what the eigenfunctions will be for the different energy levels. Okay, we saw that the energy levels were discrete, and then we also normalized the wave function. So everything is now in terms of the parameters of the problem, and now we want to see what are the forms of the eigenfunctions for the different energy levels. Okay, now for n equal to 1, psi 1 x, you simply put n equal to 1 in the expression, and you see it is root over 2 by L sine pi by L x. All right, so you see this psi 1 x becomes 0 at x equal to 0 and x equal to L. All right, if you put x equal to 0, psi 1 x is 0. If you put x equal to capital L, psi 1 x is 0. So the function vanishes at the boundaries, that is 0 and capital L. Hence, there are two nodes present at x equal to 0 and x equal to L. Since this is a sinusoidal function, there will be nodes and antinodes, and for the n equal to 1 energy level, we find that there are two nodes present at x equal to 0 and x equal to L. Then let us go to n equal to 2. Again, putting 2 in the expression of psi n x, we find psi 2x is root over 2 by capital L sine 2 pi x by L. Now, what are the positions at which this function will go to 0? At x equal to 0, at x equal to capital L by 2, and at x equal to L. So, there are three positions at which the eigenfunction for the second energy level or the second excited state goes to 0 at the boundaries 0 and L, and also at the middle of the well. So in this case there are 3 nodes present at x equal to 0, x equal to L by 2 and x equal to L. Then we see what happens for n equal to 3. Again, putting the value in psi 3x equal to root over 2 by L sine 3 pi x by L, we see this function vanishes at 4 points. X equal to 0 and x equal to L are always there. They have to be there because the function has to be continuous with the function outside at the boundaries. So psi has to be 0 at the boundaries. Further, it also goes to 0 at L equal to 3 and x equal to L by 3 and x equal to 2L by 3. So we have 4 nodes present at 0, L by 3, 2L by 3 and L. And further, we can keep on putting the different values of n and find out the positions at which the eigenfunction goes to 0 for the different energy levels. What we must note now is that at n equal to 1, that is the ground state, there are 2 nodes. N equal to 2, that is the first excited state, there are 3 nodes. N equal to 3, the second excited state, there are 4 nodes. And in this manner, if you go on, we'll find that at the nth excited state, the number of nodes is n plus 1. So now we can draw the wave functions for the different energy levels. You see, the simplest is the ground state, n equal to 1, 2 nodes, this is the wave function, n equal to 2, 3 nodes, this is the wave function, n equal to 3, 4 nodes, n equal to 4, 5 nodes, and so on. All right. 2 nodes are always present at the boundaries, and for the different energy levels, the number of nodes in between increase. How? For any given nth level, we have n plus 1 nodes. So basically, the different excited states are different modes of vibration of the particle. Can you identify this with your vibration chapter that you did probably in some earlier semester? The different modes of vibration where nodes and number of nodes and antinodes keep changing. Can all of you identify this?
Yes, ma'am.
So basically the particle is vibrating, it is performing to and fro motion back and forth between the walls, and the different energy levels are basically its different modes of vibration. So for each energy level, the number of nodes and antinodes change, and for a given nth level, the number of nodes is given by n plus 1. Okay?
Ma'am,
Yes.
ma'am, these
Bolo.
functions. Hello.
Mm-hmm.
Ma'am, can these functions actually represent the shape of an orbital? Like,
Well, the shape of an orbital is determined by several other things like the orbital angular momentum, the interfering magnetic fields, the magnetic field of the nucleus and the electron, etc. But primarily, yes, primarily this, yes. The modes of vibration of the electron, and then the shape is further modified by the other interactions, but primarily this determines the shape of the orbital, yes. Okay. So this problem basically forms the basis of the entire rest of atomic physics. This is the basis of that. All right. Next we study the orthogonality of the wave functions. Okay, this is again just a mathematical exercise, but important. See, let us denote the eigenfunction corresponding to the energy eigenvalue En as psi n, and that corresponding to the energy eigenvalue Em as psi m. So we write down the two functions psi nx and psi mx. All right. Now, since both the functions are real and since m is not equal to n, we can write psi m star psi n as this. We put in the values of psi m and psi n, and using your trigonometry this to show that the wave functions are mutually orthogonal. So they form an orthogonal set in the interval
ম্যাম
0
মাঝখানে
to L.
সাউন্ডটা পুরো কেটে গেছিল, একটু শোনা গেল না ওই একটা জায়গাটা।
এই কোনখানটা বলে অর্থোগোনালিটির জায়গাটা?
অর্থোগোনালি স্টার্ট থেকে জাস্ট আপনি স্টার্ট বললেন অর্থোগোনালি, সেখান থেকে আর কিছু শোনা যায়নি।
Okay. I'll just repeat myself. Okay. So we denote psi n and psi m to be the eigenfunctions corresponding to the energy eigenvalues En and Em. So we write down psi n as this and psi m as this. Now we can see that in this case the functions are real. So psi n star will be equal to psi n and psi m star will be equal to psi m. Complex conjugates are same as the functions themselves. And since we have taken m not equal to n, so if you put this down in the condition of orthogonality 0 to L psi m star psi n, put the values of psi n and psi m, and using your knowledge of trigonometry, you can show, of course, that this integral within the limits 0 to L is 0. So generally speaking, 0 to L psi m star psi n equal to 0 to L psi n star psi m is equal to delta mn, where delta mn is the Kronecker delta. Why we are doing this mathematical exercise? To show that the wave functions form an orthogonal set. Whatever wave functions we get for the different values of n, they will form an orthogonal set. They are independent of each other within the interval 0 to L. But the wave functions do not exist outside the interval 0 to L. So we can generally say that the wave functions that are solutions of the Schrodinger equation for a particle trapped within an infinite box, they form an orthogonal set everywhere in space. Okay, basically form an orthogonal set. Okay, next, the final thing that we are going to discuss for this problem is the probability of location. Now we saw that the particle is always there within the box, and we also saw that there are only certain values of energies that the particle can have, so that we now have discrete energy levels. We also saw the nature of the eigenfunction for the different energy levels. So we saw that the different energy levels basically give different modes of vibration of the particle. Now the last thing that we want to know is where within the box is the highest probability of finding the particle at a particular instant of time. We saw that it has to be there somewhere within the box between 0 and L at any instant of time. At what position between 0 and L is the highest probability of finding it. Okay. Now we know that probability density definition is given by mod psi n squared dx, and in this case therefore it is given by 2 by L sine square n pi x by L dx. Okay. So what is the max? Since it is the sine square function, so the maximum value will be given when sine square n pi x by L is 1, because that is the maximum value a sine square function can have. So probability density is maximum when sine square n pi x by L is 1. And that is possible when n pi x by L is equal to pi by 2, 3 pi by 2, 5 by 2, 5 pi by 2, etc. That is odd multiples of pi by 2, which means that probability is maximum at what positions? At x equal to L by 2n, 3L by 2n, 5L by 2n, etc. So once again you see there is the dependence on the integer n. Depending on the value of n, the probability of finding the particle at a particular position x will change. So the probability of finding the particle at a particular x will vary for the different excited states, for the different energy levels. All right? How? So for ground state n equal to 1, and therefore Px is maximum at x equal to L by 2, right? Because anything else, if you put 3L by n equal to 1, then 3L by 2 will be outside the box, so particle not present there. So the only position of only value of x at which probability is maximum is at L by 2. N equal to 2, first excited state, Px is maximum at L by 4 and 3L by 4. 5L by 4 again greater than L, so it goes outside the box. Once again, not possible. So the two positions of x at which probability of finding the particle is maximum are at L by 4 and 3L by 4. Second excited state, n equal to 3, so Px is maximum at L by 4, L by 6, 3L by 6, that is L by 2, and 5L by 6. 7L by 6, again greater than L, so again it will go outside the box, not possible. And in this manner, we can find out the different values of x at which the probability becomes maximum for a given value of n. And this is the diagram showing the positions at which probability becomes maximum for the different energy levels. So in the ground state, the highest possibility of finding the particle is in the middle at L by 2. In the first excited state, there are two positions at which you can find the particle with highest probability. At L by 4, this is one peak and this is the other peak, 3L by 4. For the second excited states, there are three positions at which there is highest possibility of finding the particle. At L by 6, halfway, L by 2, and 5L by 6, and so on further. So the probability densities for the different energy levels are different and are governed by the value of n. Clear? So now we are at a position to see what this problem has given us. First of all, it has given us what is depicted in the middle picture here. It has given us discrete energy levels. N equal to 1 gives E1, n equal to 2 gives E2, and so on. In between these values, the particle cannot exist. The particle cannot have any energy which is not given by a non-integral value of n. Second, it has given us the different wave functions for the different energy levels. For the first excited state, it has two nodes, one antinode. For the second excited state, it has three nodes, two antinodes. For the for the first excited state. For the second excited state, it has four nodes, three antinodes, and so on. So we get different modes of vibration for the different energy levels. And finally, we get the probability density of finding the particle in the different energy levels. In the ground state, the highest possibility is in the middle, which is, you can relate it to the wave function. In the first excited state, there are two positions where the highest possibility of finding the particle is there, which again can be related to the wave function you see at the positions of the two antinodes. But the probability wave function is a positive function, so we get two peaks in the upper side only. For the second excited state, three positions, again related to the three antinodes, and so on. So this is a comparative diagram showing the energy levels, eigenfunctions, and the corresponding probability densities. You can go on to the internet, and there are very, very beautiful animations showing how this probability density and wave function vary. I tried to include a GIF animated file in this PPT, but I failed to do that. I tried till late at night yesterday, but I failed to do that. If anyone knows how to include a GIF file into a PowerPoint presentation, please tell me, give me a suggestion, because I have not been able to do that. In some earlier class also, I tried to include a GIF file, but I could not do that. So if anyone knows how to do it, please let me know. I'm always ready to learn. A GIF file always, makes the PowerPoint more attractive. So this is the basic idea. Okay, now let us see what the momentum eigenvalues are. Okay, any question related to this? This is the, this sort of summarizes what we have discussed so far. All right?
Ma'am, if the
Yes.
probability of finding a particle there is high, that means the momentum there is the least.
No. Momentum and position will always compensate each other following HUP. Probability of finding the particle doesn't mean that momentum is least. Why do you say that?
Because the probability is dependent on the momentum and the position, like h greater than h by 4 pi, that thing. So that means both the factors have to compensate at that point.
Yes, they are always compensating at that point. If this is, if you are saying that this is the position, no, actually this is the position where mod chi square becomes highest. So whenever you are trying to, suppose you are trying to take a photograph of the particle oscillating between 0 and L in the ground state. So the number of photographs in which you will find the particle at the position L by 2 is the highest. If you've taken, say, 100 photographs, then probably you will get, say, 60 photographs in which you will find the particle at L by 2, and the rest will be at the different other positions. That is what this means. All right. Am I clear?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the momentum eigenvalues, this is again just a mathematical
ম্যাম
sort
একটা
of.
জিনিস জিজ্ঞেস করছি
হ্যাঁ, বলো।
ম্যাম এই ফটোগ্রাফ টেকিং এর অ্যানালজিটা ইউজ করে, মানে সাপোজ একটা অবজারভেশনাল কোনো একটা অবজারভেশনাল কিছু দিয়ে যদি ওটা মানে মেজার করা হচ্ছে যে ওই জায়গা, তো তখন ওইটা মানে কত ফ্রিকোয়েন্সিতে ওটা মেজার করা হচ্ছে সেটাও ওটাকে নর্মালাইজ, মানে মেজারমেন্টটা যে ক্যাপচার হচ্ছে সেটা নর্মালাইজ করবে কি করবে না সেটা ওই ফ্রিকোয়েন্সিটার উপর ডিপেন্ড করছে তো তখন তাহলে।
Absolutely, absolutely. When you are talking about this experimentally, like it is when it is happening really in the lab, then everything has to be normalized. Absolutely.
ম্যাম সাপোজ ওই ফ্রিকোয়েন্সিটা খুবই যদি লো থাকে তাহলে তো মানে ওই
একদমই ওটা কোনো মানেই হয় না।
আচ্ছা,
ওটা তাহলে কোনো মানেই হয় না। It doesn't make sense. Okay, because we are trying to capture very fast moving and very highly microscopic, submicroscopic particles. So a low frequency probe, something that is capturing, say, the electrons, or taking the a probe that is actually observing this phenomena. If it is a low frequency probe, then it doesn't make sense. All right. Okay. So for discussing the momentum eigenvalues, we must keep in mind that this is non-relativistic motion. So the energy En in terms of momentum is given by Pn square by 2m, where Pn is the momentum in the nth quantum state. All right. So we can write Pn square is 2m En. So this is the expression for Pn square. What we want to arrive at is that the value of Pn, that is momentum of the particle in the nth quantum state, is n pi h cut by L with a plus or minus sign. As you can see that for a given quantum state, this is a constant. Pi, h and L are constant. So for a given number n, Pn is a constant but with a plus or minus sign. So that is what gives it the uncertainty. The sign gives it the uncertainty. So although it has a constant magnitude, but it keeps changing direction. This is also the same that is happening in classical treatment. Same thing is happening here because the particle is continuously changing direction during its to and fro motion. And if you put h cut equal to h by 2 pi, then this is the expression of the momentum of the particle in the nth quantum state, nh by 2l with the plus or minus sign. What we want to discuss here is that the momentum eigenvalues are also discrete. The particle cannot have any possible value of momentum. It also depends on the value of n. The difference in momentum between two consecutive levels is h by 2l, which is a constant. In case of energy, we saw that the difference in energy between two consecutive levels increased with the further you go up. So higher energy levels were more widely spaced. The gap between two consecutive levels increased when n was higher. But the gap of momentum between two consecutive levels is always the same. No matter how further away the two levels are in terms of energy, the difference in momentum between particles of two consecutive levels is a constant given by h by 2l. And the plus or minus sign of the momentum indicates the back and forth motion of the particle inside the box, as I told you. All right. So this is a small thing that not all books have, but this is an important point to be discussed related to this problem. And finally, we have to discuss the case of 0-point energy. This is one thing that I have been, subtly avoiding while I have been discussing the earlier slides. We discussed quantum states, we discussed quantization, discussed discrete energy levels, we discussed band gap, we discussed probability, but I have not mentioned this till now. What is 0-point energy? Now, what do we mean by the ground state of any system? Not only a quantum system, any system. Ground state means lowest possible energy, okay? And if we think about any system classically, then the lowest possible energy is rest, right? When a particle is at rest, it has the lowest possible energy in terms, of course, of kinetic energy, because here we are talking about a moving particle. In this case, however, we saw that the lowest possible value of energy is non-zero, right? E1 given by n equal to 1, which gave us the ground state, was not 0, which means that the particle is never at rest. The particle can never be at rest inside such a one-dimensional infinite potential well. And this, in fact, is in agreement with Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. How? You see, the particle is trapped within a finite region in space, correct? So we have some information about its position. The position is not totally unknown. We have partial information about its position in the fact that it is always there between 0 and L. Where within 0 and L is something we will find out using probability density, but it is somewhere between 0 and L. So we have some information about its position. Therefore, we cannot know momentum with conformation. Remember, in the case of free states, we always started with a particular value of momentum, px. Energy was given by px square by 2m. That is how we started off the problem. That is how we formulated Schrodinger equation. In this case, you cannot fix in on a particular value of momentum, because here the position has a certain information given. So we cannot know a particular value of momentum with conformation, which means the particle is never at rest, because the particle at rest means momentum is 0. Momentum is 0 means we are getting a fixed value of the momentum, which in turn would violate Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, because in that case the uncertainty in position would become infinite, but the uncertainty in position in this case is not infinite. It is, what is the uncertainty in position? L. Uncertainty in position is simply capital L, because it has to be somewhere between x equal to 0 and x equal to L. And therefore, the uncertainty in momentum is given by h by L. Okay? So, the fact that the particle has non-zero ground state energy is related to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. This is again a very, very important concept related to this. It is often asked in your viva as well as in your theory papers. What is meant by 0-point energy? How is the non-zero ground state energy related to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, or how can you justify the non-zero ground state energy in this kind of a problem? Okay, so this is the answer to that. All right, and do I go to the 3D problem, or will it be too much of information? না এটা পরের দিন করব? Absolutely upon you.
Yes, Aisha.
আমি বুঝতে পারছি না।
কালকে মানে পরের দিনই করব।
Okay, I know, because as I told you in the beginning, there's this one-dimensional potential box problem. The mathematics is the simplest mathematics that we do in all of quantum mechanics. শুরু থেকে শেষ অবধি, the entire of quantum mechanics, the mathematics of this is probably the simplest, but the discussions, the concepts that are given are the most important conceptually, and you need to be absolutely clear about the concepts given in this problem, because these are, as you have seen, I'm sure you have realized as I was discussing the different points, that these are all related to our further studies of atomic physics, then spectroscopy and everything else. So very, very important discussion today, not only in terms of exam, but in terms of physics as a whole. So please, everybody, go through these. Questions should come up, and any doubts, please do ask me in my next class or in between during the week. Okay, one more thing. The next class will probably be the final class for doing quantum mechanics, because we don't have, that is the last module of unit 2 in quantum mechanics in our syllabus. And I don't think, although the college has told us to